Hello, this is the recording for the Business Communications. I'm working out of the Business Communications Skills book, Communicating Skills for the Processing of Words, 5th edition, ISBN number 0538-439-556. And this is Unit 3, where we're going to finish up with the commas, then we'll work on dashes and everyone's favorite hyphens. I have a little bit of a cold, so try and keep it under control, but if I go into a coughing spell, I'll have to, I guess, start over. Okay. We're going to talk about coordinating adjectives, non-restrictive clauses, afterthoughts, sentence interrupters, and then our hyphens with compound adjectives. My board is acting up again. So I'll try to use it from here. With coordinating adjectives are anytime you have two or more adjectives that are describing the same noun. And when we have that, we will separate the two adjectives by putting a comma in between them. And in order to talk about this, I'd like to talk to you first about what an adjective is. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. When we were in school, we had to come up with our list of adjectives. Do you guys ever remember playing that Mad Lib where you give an adjective or you give a noun? Well, let's go back to that just for a second. And if you give me a list of two adjectives, the first one I'm going to use beautiful. Okay. My second adjective, just give me another adjective, is loud. Now I have two adjectives. If I put a noun directly behind them, then those two adjectives will be describing that noun. So let me say, whoops, beautiful, loud girl. Now that is saying that the girl is beautiful and the girl is loud, using two adjectives to describe one noun. Whenever we have that happen, we have to put a comma in between the two adjectives. But make sure you do not put a comma between the last adjective and the noun. And one of the ways to make sure that we have this, because you'll start to see them and you'll want to check, you want a way to check it. Well, the best way to check it is if you have two adjectives that are equally describing the same noun, you can switch them and you could say the worn old book just as easily as you could say the old worn book. Still means the same thing, still makes sense. Another thing that you can do is put and in between them. It's the worn and old book. In order to have a coordinating adjective, you also have to have a noun directly after them for it to be modifying. So coordinating adjectives are two or more adjectives, describing the same noun. So we're always going to look for that noun too. Let's take a look at the next one. We have a steep, unpaved path. We have our noun, path. What kind of path? It's steep and unpaved, unpaved and steep. Yes, they both make sense and both mean the same thing. So we would put a comma in between them. Let's do some sentences. All we could see before us was green, rocky terrain. What kind of terrain? Terrain's my noun. Is green and rocky, rocky and green, so we put a comma. Lee's homemade embroidered shawl belonged to her grandmother. What kind of shawl? Homemade and embroidered embroidered and homemade, so we put a comma. The dizzy, lightheaded feeling resulted from the high altitude. What kind of feeling? Dizzy and lightheaded, lightheaded and dizzy, so we put our comma. I enjoy visiting the sophisticated, fashionable city of Rome. What's my noun? City. The city was sophisticated and fashionable, fashionable and sophisticated, so we'll put a comma. My adventuresome, daring cousin is taking flying lessons. Cousin is my noun, and he is adventuresome and daring, daring and adventuresome, so we put a comma. The reason we're making sure we put that and we switch them is because sometimes we'll get a hold of an adjective that more closely modifies the noun than the first adjective. So if I say the expensive crystal vase, expensive is an adjective and crystal is an adjective, but and vase is a noun. But when I say it like this, expensive and crystal vase, that doesn't sound right. Or crystal expensive vase doesn't quite sound right. And the reason that is because crystal is more closely modifying vase than is expensive. So what is actually happening here is your noun is crystal vase, and it is an expensive crystal vase. So that helps if you always put that and in between it and then try and switch them. That'll keep you from putting your comma on times like this when actually crystal vase is your noun. Okay. Next, let's talk about non-restrictive clauses. A non-restrictive clause is a descriptive clause that is not essential to the meaning or the grammatical correctness to the sentence, and it is set off by commas. However, a restrictive description is essential to the meaning of the sentence, and it's not set off by commas. So if we need it for the meaning of the sentence, we're not going to set it off with commas. If we do not need it for the meaning of the sentence, then we do set it off with commas. One trick that they tell you in the book is if they use which gets a comma. If they use that does not get a comma. And when they have who, we have to question it to see if it gets a comma or not. The main thing we're looking for is if the who clause is limiting it so that you're only looking for those that are in the who clause, or if the who clause is adding additional information to something you've already mentioned. In other words, the who clause is acting more like an appositive or more information about something you've already mentioned. Let's take a look at the sample sentences, and this will give you an idea of what I mean. I recently visited the Eiffel Tower, which is in France. Notice that we have our noun, the Eiffel Tower. This which clause is giving us more information about something we already have, the Eiffel Tower. That means it's not essential to the sentence. We already know we're talking about the Eiffel Tower, and then it just mentions which is in Rome. So we put a comma, and we would actually put two commas before and after if we could fit it in, but we can't fit it in because there's a sentence ends there. So we put our comma there. The passenger who became ill on the airplane was taken off at the first stop. Here we have the who clause, so we have to question it. We go back to the passenger and we see if we can do without this and still understand who they're talking about. The passenger was taken off at the first stop. But we're not just talking about any passenger. We're only talking about the one who became ill. So we need this information, so we do not put commas. before and after that clause. Some of the things, what if it would have said, the last passenger to get on the plane who became ill? Well, then we would put commas because it would be limiting that enough. We would already know who the passenger was. Let's take a look at some more examples. Maybe that'll help us to see the differences. Johansson Company, which is an expensive jeweler, has a reputation for quality. Here we've got a dead giveaway because we have which is an expensive jeweler. That whole clause is extra information about Johansson and Company. So we'll put commas before and after that clause. Aunt Ella, who is 90 years old, is my father's sister. Let's see if we need this clause. Aunt Ella is my father's sister. Knowing that she's 90 years old is extra information about somebody we already know about, Aunt Ella. So that is extra information, not essential to know who we're talking about, so we'll put commas around it. The person who won the jackpot prize is a shy individual. We have who, so we have to question it. The person is a shy individual. That's not quite the same as what we're talking about. We're not just talking about any person. It's limiting it too much. Or it's limiting it so when we say who won the jackpot prize so that we know who we're talking about. Therefore, we would not put commas because this clause is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Tourists often visit the Lincoln Memorial, which is in Washington, D.C. The Lincoln Memorial, which is in Washington, D.C., that was one of our dead giveaways because of the which. So we do not need that additional information. Besides that, we already know that we're talking about the Lincoln Memorial, and this information is extra information about the Lincoln Memorial. Today I met with the author who wrote the bestseller about the Supreme Court. Do I know anything about the author yet? I don't. So this who wrote the bestseller, that's information that I need for the meaning of the sentence. So I do not put a comma there. Okay, let's move on. Last about commas, we're going to talk about afterthoughts and sentence interrupters. An afterthought is a word or a phrase or clause that is loosely added to the end of the sentence. An afterthought is set off by commas to indicate a natural pause that occurs in the process, and a dash is used if you want to put emphasis on it. The main rule that I usually go by on whether to put a comma or a dash is if it is a parenthetical that's loosely added to the end of the sentence, then it'll get a comma. If it is answer or response to the sentence that I've just written or just stated, then it will get a dash. Let's take a look at the examples and you'll see more about what I'm talking about. I often call these slaps in the face because you're completely finished with your sentence and then all of a sudden there's more words. So there's more words just added there. You are a wonderful person, I must say. You are a wonderful person is my sentence. I was completely done talking, and then the next thing you know, here comes I must say. I must say is a parenthetical, so I don't think they're like screaming it at you. They're probably just, you're a wonderful person, I must say. So it's real light entrance, doesn't really need emphasis. It's more of a natural pause there, so we're going to put a comma. Now let's take a look at the next one. I have one day available for a meeting, May 15th. That one's more of a slap in the face. So completely done with the sentence. I have one day for a meeting, and the next thing you know, bam, here comes May 15th. They're just shouting it at you. So we want to put a dash on ones like that. Responses to the previous statement or answers to the previous statement. Let's take a look at some examples. One person is always the last to make a payment. Janine. Can't you just say that? That's a slap in the face, don't you think? They were completely finished with their sentence. It looked like they were going to be nice. And all of a sudden, they just, bam, Janine, come out and naming people. That was just mean. But types like that, loosely added to the end of a complete sentence and needs to show emphasis. We asked the architect to change the specifications, much to his dismay. We asked the architect to change the specifications is a complete sentence. This is more like a parenthetical, much to his dismay. We're just loosely added to the end of the sentence, so we'll put a comma. I am never late to my favorite subject. Bam, math. Completely done. All of a sudden, here's your response to it. There's sort of slapping you in the face with math. Here it comes. Bam, math. This restaurant has a famous specialty, corned beef and cabbage. Do you hear it? They're done with the sentence, and then all of a sudden, they're telling you corned beef and cabbage is their famous specialty. Response to the sentence. So we're going to put a dash. Make sure my name is on the waiting list for tickets, please. That one's very easy transition, very light. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is compound adjectives. These are everyone's favorite. Not really. Everyone hates these until they figure out how to find them. Once they figure out how to find them, not everybody minds compound adjectives too bad. But a compound adjective is an adjective that uses two or more words as one descriptive unit or thought. It's okay, here's an example of a compound, or here's what a compound adjective really is. We have adjectives that already exist in our vocabulary, like beautiful, red, green. We have all these adjectives that already exist, but there comes times in our lives where we need to describe something that we don't have an adjective for. It's just almost undescriptive. So we will use our other words to make up an adjective for that word, but it usually takes more than one word. For instance, let's take a look at that first sentence where it says, we ate at an out-of-the-way picnic area. When I say it's an out-of-the-way picnic area, you can picture it. That's what adjectives do. You can kind of picture this little picnic area that's sort of set off in the woods somewhere, out of the way from everything else. They didn't have an adjective that described out of the way. So they grabbed the words out of the way, put them together for one thought or one meaning, and put it in front of picnic area. Now, out of the way is one adjective describing the picnic area. Let's say that our English book, or the book that you're using, it's an easy to understand English book. That means that our English book we don't really have an adjective that describes easy to understand. So we made it up. We put those words together and it's an easy to understand English book. Then we would hyphenate easy to understand because we're using it as one thought, one adjective for the English book. That's what a compound adjective is. Now, to recognize them, there's a couple of things I want you to make sure that you see. One of them is your noun. You absolutely have to have a noun after the compound adjective. If it is, not after. You have to have the noun after it. Yeah. If the compound adjective comes after the noun, then it's not describing the noun. It's using its own words. For instance, if I say, we ate at a picnic area that was out of the way, that's not a compound adjective. Out of the way is not acting as a compound adjective. When I put it in front of the noun, then it is acting as an adjective. So we have to have a noun directly after what we believe to be our compound adjective. The other thing is it has to be more than one word that gives you an adjective or a thought or a descriptive meaning. Does that make sense? For instance, if I were to say, the price is too high for the cost-conscious buyer, it has to be my noun. I have my noun. What kind of buyer? The buyer was cost-conscious, not cost and conscious, but cost-conscious with one meaning. And when we have more than one word directly before a noun, acting as a description together as a unit, then we have a compound adjective. We have to put our hyphen. These are, a lot of people find these hard to start finding, but once you start finding these compound adjectives, everybody just runs with them. So once you get this one figured out, it may be a little tough to start with, but once you get these figured out, you'll see them everywhere. Another thing I'll go ahead and tell you as a little clue is if you have two of something, like if you have a two-way mirror, normally if you have two or more of anything, you're going to use a plural for the word that follows it. So the mirror can be seen two ways. But when you're using it as an adjective, you will usually drop the plural and put it before the noun. So if you see more than one, two or more, and then a singular, and then a noun, that's like a dead giveaway. You're going to hyphenate that. Okay, let's take a look at some of the examples. The day-to-day operations of our agency are complicated. Do we have a noun? Operations. What kind of operations? Day to day. Not day and to and day, but day-to-day operations. Once I say day-to-day operations, that gives a meaning. That means the operations that you do day after day after day after day. Okay. The over-the-counter drug should relieve your headache. We have our noun. What kind of drug? Over-the-counter. That gives a description to the drug. It tells me that this drug is sold over the counter. An adjective that I didn't have before. Don't you think the blue and white tablecloth should match the curtains? What kind of tablecloth? The tablecloth is blue and white. Not a blue tablecloth and a white tablecloth, but blue and white tablecloth. So we have our noun and we have one meaning using more than one word. Sir, your almost empty gas tank should be filled immediately. Now this one, what kind of tank? Almost empty gas tank. So gas, is it an almost empty and gas tank? Gas and almost empty tank? No. Gas is more closely modifying it than almost empty. But almost empty is modifying it, and it's more than one word. So we're going to have to hyphenate that. It's an almost empty gas tank. Use no more than a 40-watt bulb on this lamp. This is just like we were talking about up here. Normally if we're talking about 40, we'd have to be talking about 40 watts. But because it's being used as an adjective, we're going to call it a 40-watt bulb. While we're on this really quick, if we had a 40 and a 60-watt bulb in one sentence, it would be written like this. Making sure that there is no hyphen here. Okay, that's the end of our lesson. I hope this helps. Go ahead and work through your exercises, and if you have any questions, be sure to ask. I'm going to see if I can pull this up to close it. Thank you.